The first Native American female saint will be canonized in just a few weeks. And tonight, we'll talk about the impact this event will have for Native Americans and for all Christians. And we'll discuss some of the history surrounding the church's evangelization efforts in North America. So please stay with us. Thank you and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to EWTN Live, our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. But before we get to tonight's guest, we want to take just a few minutes to let you know about an upcoming special opportunity for you to join with us in praying specifically for our nation. This coming Saturday, September 29th, EWTN will begin a special novena to the Mother of God for the nation. And here to tell us more about it is EWTN's President and CEO, Michael Warsaw. Michael.
Hi, Mitch. Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on your show tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. This is important. I mean, we inform people about a lot of things that are going on, but, you know, this network is primarily about the faith, and prayer is essential to that. So what's this novena going to be?
Sure. No, we're very excited to have worked with Father Frederick Miller, who's one of the preeminent Mariologists in the country today, in developing this new novena for our nation, this new Marian novena for our nation. As our audience, our EWTN family knows, we filed a lawsuit to challenge the HHS mandate earlier.
That's the Health and Human Services mandate, forcing us to pay for, and everybody else, to pay for contraception, abortion-inducing pills, and sterilization.
That's correct.
All of which are mortal sins for us to do.
Right, exactly. And EWTN was the first entity in the country to file suit after those rules came into final effect in February. And that lawsuit is still pending. But that's really only one part of the whole issue of religious liberty and the threats to our religious liberty that we face, and only one of the tactics that we have to address those challenges. What's most important for us as a nation is to come together in prayer. And certainly the tradition of Catholics has always been, in times of challenge, to turn to Our Lady and seek her intercession. And so we're very excited to have had the opportunity to develop this new novena for the nation, which calls all of us to prayer for our elected officials and for discernment as we approach the upcoming presidential election.
Well, very early on in our country's Catholic history, the Blessed Virgin Mary was called upon to be the patroness of our nation. And she's also, Our Lady Guadalupe is the patroness of all the Americas. So our relationship to her in prayer is very important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And at this time when we face so many challenges, I think it's important for all of us to come together in that spirit of prayer and to turn to Our Lady and ask her intercession. And so that's really why we developed this novena with Father Miller. And people can go to the EWTN website, EWTN.com, and there's a banner at that website where people can go to the novena pages. You can download the novena booklet, and then we hope that our family will join us every morning for the Mass. We'll have a number of bishops from around the country who are coming to Birmingham to celebrate the Mass, to preach, and to lead us in the novena prayers over the 9 days of the novena. We'll have Bishop James Connolly, the new Bishop of Lincoln, Nebraska, Archbishop Naumann from Kansas City, Archbishop Rohde, our Archbishop from Mobile, Bishop Barris of Allentown, Pennsylvania, Archbishop Chaput, of course, a very strong voice on the issues of religious liberty, will be here as one of the celebrants. Bishop Foley, the Bishop Emeritus of Birmingham, and then our own Bishop Baker will close the novena on October 7th, the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. So this is an important initiative. It's something that's very important to EWTN and to our nation, and I'm hoping that our audience around the world will go to that website, download the novena prayers, and join in with us in praying to Our Lady at this time. And also, I think it's important for people, if they can't join in during the Mass, to take those prayers and pray them themselves. Make others aware, so that this is a great national and international outpouring of prayer.
You know, it's going to be important not only because of the Health and Human Services mandate forcing us to pay for contraception, abortion, and sterilization, but we also want to keep very much in mind the legislation in Massachusetts allowing suicide. And, you know, the state would allow it. It's, we want to pray for life from the beginning to the end. And that's what this novena is about.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And there's so many challenges that we face. The Massachusetts initiatives, the same-sex marriage initiatives in multiple states. There are so many challenges to life and to issues of religious liberty that are going on
marriage.
right now. And to exactly.
Yeah, last week on the show we talked about those are non-negotiable issues. You know, the integrity of marriage, life, and religious liberty. You know, we have to very much pray, do what we can in the world and culture, but prayer is going to be our base point.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I hope that our family will join in and join us in this new novena.
Yeah, I always think of prayer as being like the battery in a car. It's not a moving part, but without it, nothing gets started.
That's right.
So again, go to www.ewtn.com/novena to learn more about it and get a copy from the internet. Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate you being here. And we'll be right back with tonight's guest, Beth Lynch. So please stay with us. Thank you, and welcome back. Now we can start our conversation with our guest. She is here tonight to give us some insight into the life of Blessed Kateri Tekawitha ahead of her canonization, which will take place in Rome next month. Please welcome the museum and event coordinator for the Shrine of Our Lady of Martyrs in Orisville, New York, Beth Lynch. Beth, welcome.
Thank you, Father. Wonderful to be here.
Good to have you here.
Very exciting time.
Yeah, I got to go up to the shrine, a couple of years ago, at least 2-3 years ago.
Yes, it was our 125th anniversary year.
That's right, that's right.
We had a wonderful time.
It was.
Yes.
It was a very beautiful place, and it's the Shrine of the North American Martyrs in the United States. There's one up in Canada,
correct,
where some of them died, and one here in the United States, where others died.
Right.
And you worked there in the museum.
Yes. I've put the whole story together in one timeline because it's quite complex. We start with the Jesuits in Canada and end up with Blessed Kateri Tekawitha. So it's a long story.
Well, let's take a look at that. French Jesuits came to Canada to be missionaries.
Right.
And they went to mostly the Huron tribes,
Right.
Up farther north, right? How did they get down to the Iroquois nation?
Well, all travel was either on foot or by canoe, right? The waterways, of course, were for travel, for transporting, for getting supplies, and there was an 800-mile canoe trip between the missions in Huronia and Quebec. And
long trip
it was a long trip by canoe.
By canoe.
And very
No
dangerous
motorboats.
trip. No motorboats. No lattes along the way. Nope. This was tough. They were tough men.
Yep.
The reason that they ended up at Auriesville, which was your question, is because they were captured and brought to Auriesville. All right. Isaac Jogues was making a supply run on the St. Lawrence when he was captured by the Iroquois, the Mohawk among them, and was brought to Auriesville.
Yeah, a lot of folks don't understand that the Iroquois were an amalgamation or a federation,
right.
a federation of
Confederacy.
7 different Indian nations.
Right, started with 5 that pretty much traversed central New York. And then later in the early 1700s, the Tuscaroras came in from the south. But at our time of our story, there were 5.
5.
Yep, and the Mohawks were the eastern gate. And Auriesville, then called Cernanon, was one of the first villages in the Mohawk Valley where prisoners were taken.
Sure.
All right.
So the Jesuits were brought there as prisoners,
Right.
Tortured,
Oh,
horribly tortured.
brutal.
Yeah, one of the tortures was to chew off fingers, and it was done to Indians, to other Native Americans, because they didn't want them to be able to pull a bow and arrow.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. A lot of people think that St. Isaac, his index fingers were taken so he couldn't hold the host for Mass, which was true, but that wasn't the reason.
Right.
See, that disarmed the enemy.
Yep.
Take the fingernails, mangle the fingers.
Right.
Yes,
And they
yes.
can't pull bows. So they had that happen, and eventually, how did they die?
They died by tomahawk blows, very quick. They survived the tortures. They were incredibly strong men. St. Rene Goupil was with St. Isaac at the time. He
Right.
survived only about 6 weeks into his captivity when he was killed. And he's buried somewhere on the shrine grounds in the ravine.
Right. There's a ravine there that the exact location of his remains is not known.
Right.
But they just know that
he's
it's in there someplace.
And we know that from the writings of St. Isaac himself.
Yes.
All right, so he buried him with his own mangled hands. He buried Rene. Yeah, so he's there somewhere. And then Isaac stayed for about a year in captivity, in slavery, before he finally escaped with the help of the Dutch, okay, who had settled in Albany. So we bring into the picture, first we have the different tribes of central New York State fighting with Canada, and then we bring the Jesuit missionaries into it. And then we introduce the Dutch Protestants into it, who
Right,
were
and-
on good trading terms with the Mohawks.
Right, but this Dutch trader, did for pelts and things, protected Saint Isaac.
Yeah.
He just out of just decent humanity.
That's right.
To
That's right.
get him out of the slavery.
And when you look at the contention between the different missionaries and the different denominations of Christianity coming to the New World, when they saw that there were Jesuit missionaries, even though they were Catholics and they didn't like Catholics, hey, he's a brother in the Lord.
Yep.
Even though he said, he's a papal idolater
Right,
and he's a
right.
dangerous Jesuit,
Right, right.
but he's a brother in the Lord, and we're going to do what we can to help him.
And they really did.
Eventually,
They got
yeah.
him all the way back to France.
Got him, which was that's a story in itself. But yes, he made it all the way back to France under shipwreck, under cannon fire, under robbery, under a infected dog bite that almost lost. He almost lost his life. He was an amazingly strong man.
What's also amazing though is that after getting to safety in France and seeing his mother, he asked to come back to the missions.
Oh yeah.
When
God calls you,
yeah, that's strong.
he's known as the apostle to the Mohawks.
Right.
And he knew, even before he came to the New World, he knew that just as soon as he was ordained, he wanted to be a missionary. He thought he was going to Ethiopia. But his spiritual director at the time said, no, you will die nowhere but New France. See, so they had these premonitions, I suppose. So even though he was safe and sound in France, and he had gotten special dispensation from the Holy Father to celebrate Mass with those mangled hands,
Right.
he said, okay, time for me to go back. He was only 4 months at home, and he headed back.
And when he came back, he was actually on an embassy to the Mohawk when he was recaptured.
Right. Well, the first 2 years when he returned, he was going to the peace talks. And so he was encountering some of the people that had actually tortured him.
Right.
And now, okay, it's time for peace. Some of these talks, they were not aware that he was in the crowd, and they were saying things that weren't true, and he was, no, that's not what happened,
Right.
But they knew him, of course, and they learned to trust him. And once he was given this position of authority as a peace ambassador, and he wasn't a slave, he wasn't despised anymore. Okay, will you come and talk to us at our village? So it took 2 years. And that first negotiation at Auriesville went very well. And he stopped off first in Albany, what a guy, to pay back the ransom that the Dutch had given the Mohawks
For him.
When he escaped. This was 4 years earlier. So he comes up that same hill of torture, but this time welcomed.
Right.
And the peace talks go well, and they.
What led to his martyrdom then?
So the martyrdom, they invite him to build a mission, and so he goes back to Canada because he needs help to do that, and he brings our third martyr back with him, John de Lalande, a teenager, and they're captured about 2 days' walk from Auriesville, and that's when they're beaten again. They're taken captive. They're thrown into the longhouse. What are we going to do with them? And he learns that it's because on his first peace negotiation, he'd left a box of belongings, which they were suspicious of because it was locked, and they'd never seen a lock and key. And sure enough, after he leaves in June, comes back in October, there'd been a crop failure, some illness.
And they
That
blamed
sorcerer,
him.
you left an evil spirit in that box.
Right.
So, but he still tried to negotiate with them. When he was invited to the longhouse of the Bear Clan, which was the more warlike of them, he was warned, don't do this, don't do this. Well, what am I going to do? I'm not going to insult them.
Right.
And that's when he was tomahawked. And then John tries to recover the body or take the relics or whatever, and he's tomahawked and killed. Their bodies were thrown into the Mohawk River.
Yes.
See, so we have no relics of our 3 Auriesville martyrs.
Right.
Yeah.
So this story of the martyrdom of these Jesuits in North America is part of the story of Kateri.
Exactly.
How does it connect to her?
Exactly. That, as we've always said, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church.
Yeah, Tertullian had mentioned that.
And how true, and we see that over and over and over again in church history. And when they were killed, when they died, and even the Jesuit missions in Canada in Huronia was a failure. And but the blood of the martyrs, see, when people see that, when they see the suffering, when they see what is so powerful in this, what is it we want to know? And Isaac knew that. He knew he wasn't trying to escape that whole time because he was the only priest, the only Catholic priest with bringing sacraments. In Adirondack Mountains, the Mohawk Valley, anywhere, he was the only one. He knew that they needed him long before they knew that they needed him.
Sure.
So Blessed Kateri, she was born 10 years after his death. Her mother was a convert to Catholicism. She was an Algonquin from Canada, had been captured pretty close to the same place that Isaac and Renee had been. So she's brought to the village a captive, marries the chief of the village, and so little Kateri is born into a major conflict, between the Algonquins and the Mohawks, between the Catholics, her mother, and the faith of her people. into the conflict of all the tortures and the contention that's going on, into the conflicts of the enculturation that's happening. You know, the Europeans bringing a whole new world, a whole new lifestyle to them.
I mean, there was technology that there were no pieces of iron.
Right.
There were no alloys.
That's right.
The most of metal they may have had were copper, maybe some gold, maybe, but not even much of that in New York. So these are all new technologies, as well as a whole other way of thinking.
And how much easier is it to cut down a tree with an iron axe than a stone?
Exactly.
You see, so they were eager to trade.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was a very active village. But one of the things, one of the scourges that the Europeans brought, of course, was disease.
Right.
And smallpox comes through.
Right. There were diseases apparently that some of the Europeans contracted from Native Americans in the Caribbean and elsewhere and brought to Europe, but because they didn't have immunities that the Native Americans didn't have immunities to things like smallpox.
Right.
So these were.
Oh, it was devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating. So Kateri lost her parents, her baby brother. The good part of the village died, and she was adopted into her father's family. Now, we get her name, Tekawitha, after the smallpox epidemic, because her name at birth was Little Sunshine. And it was customary that as a child grew, the name was changed to reflect their personality or their characteristics.
Sure.
Well, she was almost blinded by the smallpox.
I see.
So Tekawitha means somebody who gropes around, pushes things out of the way, puts things in order. You know, all these interpretations indicate there's a vision problem.
Sure.
So that's when she became Tekawitha. And they moved the village a few miles west, still on the south bank of the Mohawks, and that's when she's introduced to the Jesuit missionaries again. The black robes come back. There's been, the wars continued. The French said enough is enough with the raids on the St. Lawrence, and they sent an army down through the Mohawk Valley and burned everything to the ground. So she was about 10 years old by then. So she's lost her parents and her brother and her sight and her health and her home. And the Jesuits come and say, okay, it's time for peace. And she and the other members of her village were astounded by these gentle, intelligent, welcoming priests, black robes, who come after they'd just seen this army in a rage and a fury burning down their homes. Sure. So I think, oh, there's another side to these French people. Right. See? And at the same time, they saw something in this little girl, this little 10-year-old girl. Virtue, modesty, shyness. There was something about her that attracted them as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So she accepted the Catholic faith?
Yeah, eventually. Her uncle didn't want her to have anything to do with it. He was losing a lot of the village to the faith. When people converted, they were going to Canada. Okay, so he had already lost people to disease and war, and now people are leaving.
Moving to Canada.
So he wasn't happy about this at all, but finally she did get some formal catechesis. She was baptized in Fonda, New York. There's another shrine to Kateri in the Mohawk Valley. It's only about 7 miles from us, the National Kateri Shrine. So she was born at Orisville, baptized in Fonda. She had suffered persecution even before her conversion. She was different. She was shy. She didn't like the festivals. She didn't like getting dressed up. She wasn't vain. She didn't like the gossip of the village, and especially she didn't like the torture. Okay? She used to beg her uncle, I'll stay in the longhouse, I'll do my beads. She was very good at crafts, but don't make me go. And so that's what she would do. So she knew that her heart, her body, everything about her belonged to something much greater than herself. She didn't have a word for it. But she knew this. And so when they were trying to pair her with different young men of the village to marry, she she would run away, she would hide. And they were, well, this is insanity, they told her. Who's going to hunt for you? Who's going to take care of you? When a woman married, the man came into the house of the woman. And so if you have a brave warrior and a good hunter, see, all that was into their longhouse, into their family. And Kateri was a princess. Her father had been the chief of the village.
Sure.
So they wanted her to marry, and her refusal was, they didn't know how do you handle this? Yeah. But she knew who she was even before she knew who Jesus Christ was. See, this is how the Holy Spirit spoke to her.
Sure. And she, took to the faith.
Yes.
The rosary was very important to her.
Yep.
And again, you mentioned how she worked with beads and was very good at that. Well, the rosary beads made good sense.
Yes, and they
as a matter
made
of fact,
sense
this
too.
is an example of wampum here.
Right. See, they were very familiar
the
with
kind of bead
making.
work that's done.
And sometimes these would be in strings, and they would be passed back and forth as the story was told. So they were familiar with beads on a string. So this, they
To tell a story.
To tell a story.
Sure.
And that's what the rosary is, tells the story of the life of Jesus.
Right.
See, so this made sense to her. But she had a sensitivity about the spiritual. And she knew that the Catholic priests had a power. Of course, that was through Jesus Christ, in them.
Right.
But she sensed this, and she wanted to know what they knew. And one of the most beautiful quotes from her, I think, and this sums up her whole life, is, "Who can tell me what pleases God so that I may do it?" Okay.
That's a great quote.
Isn't that beautiful?
Any
That
one
is
of us.
Beautiful. That's what makes a saint.
Yep.
To have that desire, and then to have the perseverance, to pursue this.
Yeah, that quest for what pleases God.
Yep.
Tell me so I can do it.
Who can tell me? And so who did she go to? The priest. See, she knew. She just knew that that's where the answer was. Yeah.
Well, this is a very important thing because, in one sense, it brings a very important element of these early Catholics here in North America.
Oh, yes.
And her canonization next week is, like it is for any of us, whether you're from Europe, Africa, Asia, or the Americas. Canonization of one of your own is the crowning point.
That's right.
Of, because it's not like becoming, a politician or something. Somebody else takes your place, but you're a saint.
That's right.
Forever.
That's right.
Forever.
And to the native people, she always has been. See, because they have loved Kateri, they have venerated her for a long, long time, prayed to her for the longest time. So many miracles, so many answered prayers.
Yeah.
She's a very, very powerful intercessor.
Oh, that's great.
When she
and
was,
that's what all of us should learn from her.
Exactly. In fact, there were so many that when Blessed Pope John Paul II beatified her, there was not one documented miracle. He said, look at this. We know she's a holy woman. We know people have been cured, and by the strength of her heroic virtue and all these testimonies, okay, he beatified her. But that one miracle needed for the canonization came through a little boy in Washington State who is of Native American ancestry.
Okay.
And he just a little kid, 5 or 6 years old, fell, cut his lip, and had a flesh-eating bacteria enter into that. That his little face swelled up like a basketball, and nothing was helping. Nothing, the antibiotic, all the treatments, nothing's helping. Sister Kateri Mitchell is the president of the Tekawitha Conference, which is an organization of Catholic Native Americans. It's about evangelization, and it was about the prayers and the cause of Kateri's sainthood, canonization. She brought a relic to little Jake to his hospital bed, and the prayer circles started to pray for him, and the disease stopped.
Oh, isn't that great?
So it, of course, it took some years. It was Monsignor Paul Lenz was the vice postulator for Kateri, and he's the one who got all the medical documents together, sent them to Rome, and then in December of last year, Pope Benedict announced, that Blessed Kateri is going to be canonized because of that miracle. So we have this little boy who's Native American and who has the facial disfigurement. Okay, like Kateri did with the smallpox. Yeah. So a beautiful parallel there.
And as a matter of fact, the request for her canonization has started much earlier. You have a letter on the table here from 1938.
1938. This pouch that's made of deer hide was given to the Holy Father and during the 1930s, Pope Pius XI. And it was full of letters from tribes all over the United States, all over Canada. And they were handwritten in their native language, so that is what's laid out here. And then there was a typewritten copy in English. And this was compiled and eventually given to the shrine. So that they're precious mementos, and they're just pouring out their hearts. This is little Kateri. We love her. We know she's a saint. And in our humility, Holy Father, please beatify her. They're asking for beatification at that time. Beautiful, heartfelt letters. And we see that too, that the Tekawitha conference came to the shrine in July because they had their conference in Albany, not far from the shrine. And these people, who've been waiting for this for so long. There was a woman who took the train to New York from New Mexico, a Navajo woman, who had donated a hand-woven blanket with the Kateri Pray For Us on it 35 years ago.
Wow.
And here we still have it in the museum. And she came to make that trip, this connection that people have with the shrine, the birthplace of this holy, holy woman.
Well, I know I've been to a number of Native parks reservations around the country, especially in Oklahoma. And she was very much loved there as well.
Yep.
And so, this is a great link of, the population that was here before Europeans came to Americas.
That's right.
And their own faith, and the crowning of that with a saint who is actually the second, because Juan Diego belonged to the Aztec nation.
Right.
She belonged to the Mohawk nation.
But she's from the area that's now the United States.
Right.
So she's first American.
The differences were, those are later differences.
That's right.
Hopefully we'll have saints from the Lakota Sioux and all the Arapaho and the Navajo and the Hopi and all the other Native peoples, so that there's a great chorus of saints to sing in their own native tongue the praises of God.
Beautiful. And there were many Native martyrs who had converted, many martyrs. Yes.
Sure.
In fact, one who was a good friend of Saint Jean de Brebeuf in Canada was killed. He had converted to the faith, and either his daughter or his niece, I've read two different things, was captured along with Saint Isaac and Saint Rene. And was taken to one of the villages close to Auriesville. And at Auriesville, we have a huge rosary made of rocks on the ground.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Well, that's in memory of little Teresa, this Huron girl, who was captured because she wouldn't stop praying. They had taken the rosary from her, but she would take a handful of pebbles and pray on the stones. And so that's what that rosary is for. And so it was her family that knew the missionary martyrs in Canada. He was a very good friend of St. John de Brebeuf. Brebeuf did his funeral mass when he was killed. He was martyred. So the history of the interactions between the Jesuit missionaries and the natives are with these wonderful conversion stories, but as well as these martyrdoms. But the beautiful thing about the way the Jesuits approached this, enculturation.
Yes.
They didn't force this.
Yeah, and they didn't try to make them French. The Jesuits learned the language of the local tribes.
That's right.
They learned Iroquois, Mohawk, Huron, all those. and wrote the first dictionaries
Can you imagine?
and grammars of those languages in order to teach other Jesuits.
Yeah.
Those are still around.
Oh, amazing. And this was a language that had no words for concepts,
Right.
you know,
Right.
God, friendship, grace.
Right.
You know,
So they had to create
right.
language.
Right. And a lot of it was very like guttural or even like a burping sound. You know, so how in the world they did this is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, but that's who they were, the zeal that they had for evangelizing the native people.
Well, they
That's what
taught
were
us
gonna do.
Jesuits learning Latin and
It's-
Greek, and so we just keep going. We want to take a break, but I just want to remind you to watch the canonization of, Blessed Kateri Tekawitha. That will be live on EWTN on October 21st, 2012, and it'll be live at 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Because they're doing it live in Rome, so it's a few hours ahead of us. But, I'm sure a lot of people will be wanting to see that and be part of that as well. And you can check for more information on that at EWTN.com. We'll take our break and be back in a couple minutes. I want to get your questions and your comments, so please stay with us. Thank you and welcome back. First of all, we'd like to invite you to be part of our studio audiences. If you can make a pilgrimage down here to EWTN, we would love to have you. You can contact our pilgrimage department by calling 205-271-2966. 205-271-2966. Or you can also go to www.ewtn.com, and they'll give you information about scheduling for programs, masses, where to stay, and how to get to Hansville, and be part of our audience. So please come. Also want to remind you that I am leading a pilgrimage to the Holy Land at Christmas time. We'll leave here December 15th. It's good to get to Israel before Christmas. It's a bit quieter. Once Christmas Eve comes, the place starts to fill up with a lot of pilgrims. But before those 10 days or so beforehand, it's very quiet, and we get to go around to a lot of places in the north, and then Jerusalem, and then we'll spend Christmas Eve in Bethlehem with Mass in Bethlehem that night. So if you can do that, please join us at call 1-800-554-4556, 1-800-554-4556, or you can go to my website, fathermitchpacwa.org, and Father is spelled out. You ready for some questions?
We're ready.
I'll start off with a caller. We have Patricia on the line. Hello, Patricia.
Hello,
Hi, where are you from?
Connecticut.
And what's your question?
Well, Father, may I first say how much I enjoy your programs. You
Thank you.
remind me of the Jesuit priest that we girls had for theology in the Dominican college from which I graduated.
Boy, it sounds ecumenical if the Jesuits are teaching at a Dominican college.
Yes, sir, we were. And we were still an all-girl college, not to reveal my age. However, I was wondering if, Father, if you and Miss Beth could both think about, I used to live in Canada, and English Canada, and I'm wondering, I don't know the exact dates, I don't know, historically, but can you tell us what you think the legacy of the French Jesuits has been from the time that they first landed in what is now Quebec and to up until to the present day, including whether it's geographical borders or language? I understand that they learned some of the Indian languages, but as a Jesuit priest and as a lovely lady who has done so much work in this same area, what is the legacy of the French Jesuits, and is there any connection today, to this day, between French Canada and their Jesuits and the Jesuits in France, your order in France?
Okay, great question. Do you want to start off with that?
Well, what comes to mind first when you talk about legacy of the North American martyrs and the French Jesuits to Canada is evangelization. Okay, that's what they came here to do.
Yep.
And that's what we're still called to do. And now more than ever, we're called to do that.
Yes.
And Kateri wouldn't be a saint, or will be a saint next month, if it wasn't for their evangelization, as well as the way they did it. Father Mark's homily this morning, he talked about the seed being planted, and the seed itself has power, the word, but we sow it in gentleness and in power. And I think that's who these Jesuit missionaries were. Yes. That's their legacy. They were strong, they were rugged, they knew who they were, and they were going to share that, and that evangelization, that zeal, I think, is very important. And also, another part of their legacy is the Jesuit relations. Okay,
explain what the Jesuit relations are.
You might explain better.
Well, it's a series of books. St. Ignatius very much wanted Jesuits, as they traveled around, to write down what they were doing, to keep a record of their activities. And the Jesuit relations are the collected works of these French Jesuits who went to Canada. And within them are their own stories of the journeys, what they saw, the kind of people they met. And as we mentioned earlier, they would write the first dictionaries of many of these languages. In fact, some modern anthropologists have gone back to the Jesuit relations in those early texts, and they have helped modern Native Americans and Native Canadians to reconstruct their language based on what the Jesuits had written down in the 16 and 1700s. Yeah. So, these are very important sources, even for anthropologists.
Oh, sure. And any book that you see, that's virtually any, that's written about that time period, you'll see references to the Jesuit relations.
Yep. The early books.
Like you're saying, the geography, the rivers, the plants. I mean, the way of life, the rituals, the customs. It's just packed with these things.
Yes.
And so that's how we know a lot of what happened to the martyrs. Isaac Jogues was writing as well with what was left of his fingers. Right. Brebeuf wrote some of the relations as well.
In terms of the relationship between the Jesuits in Canada and in France, because England conquered Canada and made it its own colony for a while, the connection with France was not what it once was. It was, of course, they still speak French in Quebec province, and Canadians across the country learn French as a second language if they're not from Quebec. So there's a strong French impact
Yes.
in Canada.
Yes, and,
But,
the Catholicism as well, the
yeah,
French Canadian,
right.
the shrines and the
Right. Saint Anne de Beaupré is very
St.
important.
Joseph's, yeah.
Right, St. Joseph's.
Yep.
But they have Canada was strong enough to become its own province of French-speaking Jesuits, and is an English-speaking province in Canada as well. So that was there.
Yeah.
I have another question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from Richmond, Illinois, Father.
Sure, right there by the border with Wisconsin.
Right, that's right.
And what's your question?
I was wondering if you know of any other miracles that have been proclaimed because of Kateri, Tekawitha, and do they have anything to do with skin diseases?
Some of them have. There's quite a variety because there's been so many. I'm aware of one of a very serious case of psoriasis.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so that was cured. But miracles involving kidney cancer, addictions, and people still come into the shrine now and talk about it. A man was in not long ago telling me how he was cured of his gambling addiction by praying to Kateri.
Given some of the trends of people opening up gambling casinos on Native American reservations all over the country,
Yes.
this may become a bigger concern.
That's right. That's right. And Kateri was very. She could see, what was good, what was evil. It broke her heart to see her people get into the alcohol.
Sure.
She saw what it could do to them.
Right.
So yeah, this would be something that would be very sad for her, very sorrowful to see her people getting involved in.
Sure.
But
sure.
Different miracles, cures, the petitions. There have been people have had encounters with Kateri even before they knew who she was. And I don't know that I've heard that about other saints. But there's a remarkable story about a man in Cambodia during the Southeast Asian War, Vietnam, who was, his whole company was killed. He was alone in the jungle. He was 50 miles from safety. And he saw an Indian woman and he followed her for all those miles. And there he was in safety, and she was gone. He had no idea who she was. And he didn't learn till he got home, and his parish was doing something or other, and there was a picture of Kateri, and he said, that's her. And other people have told me this. A man in Albania, the guardian angel of their home. This woman, he said, I didn't recognize her. She didn't really, it didn't fit with their culture. And when he came to America and learned about Kateri, that's her. So that's a very remarkable thing, how she crosses cultural boundaries.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's part of her appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what saints do.
Right.
We have another call in line. Hello, John.
Hello, Father.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Hey, good today. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, thank you. And what's your question today?
Well, I'm doing better now that I'm on the line. I wanted to say that when I was a kid, I was in Indian guides, and I've always been interested in Native Americans. So when Kateri came along, that was pretty special. And I just wanted to say that she's remarkable, and we're finding out from the witnesses of her life. And I wanted to ask our guest, Beth, if she had maybe an angle on some of Kateri's spirituality or special practices that she did, if there's something that really spoke to her. And I thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Kateri was contemplative. Okay, she was a hard worker. She did what she needed to do. She loved her people.
And life in the villages was hard.
Busy and hard, yes.
Yeah.
But she was, whenever she could, she was in front of the Blessed Sacrament, this after conversion, in front of the Blessed Sacrament at Mass, divine office. She would always had her rosary. And the people in Kanawaki, where she lived the last few years of her life, would remember her with this heavy burden of firewood, because that's one of the tasks the women had, would collect these, humped over with it, but always with the rosary in her hand. So she was in front of the Blessed Sacrament, the rosary, she did a lot of penance, severe really mortifications that we wouldn't do today. But that was another important part of her spirituality at the time. There was a kind of a collective penance that was done in the cultures. When a transgression was made, it wasn't necessarily the perpetrator. It was the responsibility of the whole village. And so when she would do penance, it was for her people. It was for her people. So she tried to take on a lot. Yeah, out barefoot in the snow and sleeping on thorns and different things. But that kind of pain, as she was familiar with from the ritualistic tortures that she had seen through her life, that can break people through to a kind of a religious experience. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of the process as well. And some of the people who witnessed her in deep prayer would say that she had a light around her. Others would say that after she had received the Eucharist, they wanted to sit close to her because they could feel that presence. Mm-hmm. So I think that because she was so contemplative and everything was for God, it comes back to that quote, "Tell me what he wants and I'll do it." That was her whole life. And
this is important. I remember one time some ladies from an eastern state had called me because there was a woman had come to their parish and started burning sage and making a circle and offering the smoke to the four directions. And they asked her, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Well, this is a Native American way to pray." And actually, it wasn't from the tribes in that state. It was from a practice of the tribes in the plains. It was a Plains Indian practice. And they said, "But we're all Polish. We're not Native Americans." And so they didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Whereas Kateri grew in her holiness by doing the same kind of practices of praying before the Blessed Sacrament, saying the Rosary, mm-hmm. meditating, mm-hmm. doing penance for her sins and the sins of others. Yep. And this is a common Catholicism.
That's right.
That she became holy the way all of us do, through Jesus Christ. That's right. And the love of his Blessed Mother. That's
right. And she recognized that truth, that pure Catholicism, that power of the power in that seed of truth, that grows of its own power. She recognized that. See, that was her spiritual sensitivity, that she could recognize that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was a very important part of her. Now, I just want to make sure that I give some more information. There is the Shrine of Our Lady of the Martyrs, mm-hmm. and that's in Fultonville, New York.
Yes.
All right.
That's the address. It's in Orisville. But
it's in Orisville is where it actually is, but the address of the town is Fultonville. And you can go to their website, which is www.martyrshrine.org. Martyrshrine.org. It's a great place to go visit. And it's 518-853-3033. You can call them and let them know.
Yes, that'd be great. The Martyr Shrine, the Martyr is singular though.
Martyr Shrine.
Martyr Shrine.
Yep. Okay, Martyr Shrine, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw the Yep. We got to go.
Oh.
We're run all out of time.
It's been great.
I want to give you all blessing. Almighty God bless you and keep you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I'll bless you with these relics of the Jesuit martyrs, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Almost forgot them. And again, if you would, keep us in between your gas bill and your electric bill so we can pay all of our bills here too. Thank you. And thank you, Beth.
Thank you.